All right, since it's 5 after, we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks again for coming today. My name is Grant King. I am one of the 3 project leads for your Mattapoisett Master Plan, and I work at Southeastern Regional Planning and Economic Development District, that's SERPED. We'll talk a little bit more about why we're here in a moment. I know we have at least one planning board member, Nathan Ketchel, is here, and for just a short while, I believe your planning director is here just for a moment. Rest assured that there was a lot of representation at an identical event that took place on Wednesday night. There were at least 2 planning board members, your town administrator and your planning director were here for the whole event. And if you're interested in what took place at that event, there's a recording of it on the project webpage that you can see. So the town is in the driver's seat for this project, and that brings me to SERPED's role. Why are we here? The town asked us to serve as your consultant, as your assistant, or as your secretary for this project. So we're mainly here to help you identify your main goals, and then to match the strategies to those goals to make them as real as possible, to implement those goals. So you're our bosses on this project. I want that to be very clear. You see on the slide in front of you down towards the bottom our agenda for tonight, or I should say today, this morning. Our main point is just to, give you a better sense of what a master plan is and what the project will look like moving forward. But the vast majority of the time, here it says breakout groups. On Wednesday night, we had about 25 participants, so we broke up into 2 rooms. This morning, I don't believe that'll be necessary. We'll probably stay in one room and just chat. It'll be a very informal conversation that we have. But the main point is to listen to you and to begin to discover Mattapoisett and your main goals for your community through your eyes. So let's get started with that process. I have a very short presentation to show you today. So when we say this morning is about vision and about discovering that vision, what exactly does that mean? We're really just referring to areas of consensus and big picture priorities and themes that will guide and influence the project over the next 24 months. So we're trying to get that big picture, overarching, all of those goals clearly identified at the beginning. And for those of you who really want to dive down deep into a particular subject or really get your hands dirty with some information, rest assured we're going to get there too, and we'll refine that vision as we go through those specialized events that are pictured here on this timeline. This timeline also helps you understand the required elements or chapters of a master plan. Those are required by Massachusetts state law. And vision is one of those chapters, as is implementation, making things real, action plan. But when you think of the main subject matter for a master plan, you're really thinking about land use, economic development, housing, open space and recreation, natural and cultural resources, services and facilities, and transportation and circulation. And for coastal communities such as Mattapoisett, we really have to also consider climate resiliency. So that is protection against and preparing for storm events and flooding and sea level rise. So we've added that optional extra element to your master planning process. The other thing I'd like you to consider while you think about all of these chapters and elements is sometimes one of your ideas or one of your projects might not fit neatly into one of these categories, and that's okay. In fact, that's usually the sign of a really good idea or a really good project. And the example I offered on Wednesday night was a well-known and well-loved project in town, the Mattapoisett Bike Path. So you might say, well, that's a transportation and circulation project. For sure, it is. But it also has aspects of open space and recreation. It also is about placemaking and connecting places. So that's land use. On the portion of the project that's up in Industrial Drive between North Street and the Marion Town line, it's part of a large water, sewer, roadway, infrastructure, economic development project. And it's such, it's such a big focus for the town, and we hear about it so much, you could even say that it's part of the town's culture and cultural resources. So I just offer that as an example to encourage you to think, to be sort of flexible with yourselves about how your ideas or the ideas of your neighbors might fit into this plan. So that's really it for the proposed timeline and direction and the required content for a master plan. And before we get to those specialized events, and before we get into this chat, what I would like to do is just very briefly show you the ways that you can participate in the project above and beyond this morning's workshop. So I hope you've visited the master plan webpage. If you have, this should look familiar. There are multiple ways to connect and share your input. There's the master plan survey, which on Wednesday night, when I last checked, had about 70 responses, which is excellent. There are several social media options here, our direct contact information, a public comment form. Basically, anytime something occurs to you that you feel like we should know about for this plan, we encourage you to let us know somehow, right, through one of these venues. I also hope you've had a chance to look at and explore some of the interactive maps, some of the data for this plan. As we move forward, we hope to refine it and ideally perfect it, make sure that it is good information to base your decisions on. And to do so, we invite you to check it out. Tell us what we've missed. Tell us where we've made errors, add and subtract. And your planning board and your planning administrator have been very active in this, and we really welcome your input as well. On both the master plan webpage and the project webpage, you'll see there are frequently asked questions ranging from, why are we doing this, to what will the document look like, to how do we make sure that we can implement it and that it really doesn't just sit on the shelf and makes change. For example, master plans are required to be updated every 10 years in state law. So your last plan was in 1999, so it's time for an update. But also we think of master plans as ways to come together as a community and achieve consensus and set a course to participate in increased state or federal programs, to update your bylaws, to coordinate applications and infrastructure investments, and to just generally increase volunteerism and stewardship in a community. So those are some of the reasons we do a master plan as a community. In addition to Wednesday night's event and this morning's event, we are interested in your input through the master plan discovery workshop webpage. That's this big blue URL link you see here. There are two major activities on that page. There's a ranking exercise that looks at the main goals from 20 years of planning in town. And then there's a points of interest mapping exercise where, we'll do our best to follow your lead today, and you'll reference places with names and road names. And sometimes we miss those. And a good way, we'll double check all of that, but a good way for you to let us know if there's a particularly important place to you is to put it on a map for us. And that mapping exercise allows you to do so and to categorize it with one of those elements that we just discussed and that we'll talk about moving forward this morning. For both of those exercises, there is a how-to video embedded right below it. So Taylor Perez, who's here this morning, one of your project leads, and Lizeth Gonzalez, who's not here this morning, they walk you through how to participate in that workshop, in those activities, I should say. So those will be up for at least 14 days. Please share that link widely and encourage others to participate in these activities. I know that there's been significant participation since last night, or since Wednesday night, I should say. I just mentioned these three names: Lizeth Gonzalez, Grant King, that's me, and Taylor Perez. We're your main points of contact for this project, in addition to Mary Crane, your planning board, your town administrator, all of whom you know how to contact through your project or your town's website. So at any point, if you have a question about this plan or a thought that you'd like to share, please reach out to us at the information or through those emails or phone numbers.
Grant, this is Mary. Just a quick logistical question. The 14 days ends when?
I think it started on the 26th, so loosely September 9th, but we're not trying to, we're not going to cut it off hard and fast. We're just trying to encourage people to really focus their attention the next 2 weeks.
Great.
Good question. Thank you. So that's it from me. That's all you're going to hear from me about the project this morning. What I'd like to do, there were more logistics before when we broke into 2 groups. I think what we'll do really quickly is I'll stop sharing my screen and Taylor will share hers, and we will show you the ground we're hoping to cover this morning in terms of the subject matter and the questions that we're going to ask you. But we certainly don't need to go in any specific order. So as you look at the list that we're about to go through, please, I think I stopped. Yeah, okay. So please, we can start wherever you guys like this morning.
Can everyone see this okay, or should I zoom in?
Looks great.
Cool.
So let me run through this really quickly, and then really we're going to turn the floor over to you. So we talked about those main elements of a master plan. Those are land use. So when we think about land use, we're talking about patterns, places, villages, corridors, open spaces, farms, the way that land is used or not used in your town. If we scroll down to economic development, those are those big public investments, water, sewer, roadways, or programs such as Chapter 43 expedited permitting, for example, or tax incentives for businesses to live and work and contribute to the tax base and jobs base in your community. If we scroll down to housing, that's market rate and subsidized dwelling units that serve a wide variety of needs and of household types in a community. We spoke about climate resilience, so that's protection against storm events, flooding, hazards, other things such as pandemics that we need to prepare for as a community and ensure that people have protections against. If we scroll down to open space and recreation, those are undeveloped areas that either already have or have potential for recreation or conservation interests. So those can range from farms and fields to habitats and wetlands and barrier beaches and islands. There's a little bit of overlap between open space and recreation in our next category, natural and cultural resources. So those habitats and aquifers that I talked about are, there's a little bit of that idea of being flexible about how an idea might fit into this plan. But we're also talking about features such as historic homes or just really well-loved businesses in towns. And what we're saying with lived experiences is basically, what is your culture? How does it feel to be a resident or a new person to town, or a born and raised Mattapoisett resident? Transportation and circulation, those are those roads, paths and sidewalks that all types of users use in town: drivers, walkers, bikers. And then finally, services and facilities. Those are town-owned, town-run places and activities ranging from Council on Aging to the website to town hall. So we'd like to talk to you, we'd like to do our best to talk to you about all of that today, but we certainly don't need to go in that order. And the way that we'd like to proceed is, like Mary did, simply raise your hand, jump in. There's no sort of rules of order here. We'll hopefully take turns, and we just want to hear from you. So that's enough from me. Who'd like to start us off? Someone has to break the ice. Let's see.
Grant?
Yes.
Hi, Mary Lou Newell speaking.
Hi, Mary Lou.
I sent you an email this morning because I was circling back to one of the other meetings that we had the other evening, in which we were talking about historical sites and things of that nature. And so I did want to make the team aware that the Mattapoisett Historical Commission, although may not be in the public eye, has been working behind the scenes We are charged by the state to capture the inventory in the village area. That's a very large project. It was done decades ago. It's well overdue to be done over again. So we're going to begin that. We've
Excellent.
also placed plaques at various locations throughout the community indicating historic locations with a descriptive panel. We're also looking at Center School, which was subsidized by Rogers many years ago and is a beautiful building that we'd like to see it designated as such. So that's kind of just some of the things that we've been doing. So I just wanted to bring the team's attention to that.
Excellent. So that's the Historic Society or the Historic Commission?
No, the commission. And
The commission.
we have rules and regulations, state mandated rules and regulations. The biggest one being that we are charged with the responsibility of identifying and preserving historic locations, but in the absence of a preservation or historical bylaw, some of that is almost impossible to execute, but we'll do what we can within the parameters the state has given us.
Excellent. So one of the ways the master plans in the past have supported similar efforts is to try and see exactly what needs, you said this work took place in the past and it's time to be updated. So for example, in the past, some of that inventory hasn't included mapping or GIS databases or the historic records that you can also tag to those mapped points or those areas or photos. So it's good for us to know exactly what you're doing and where things stood before and on what your goals are for the update and how to help you meet those state requirements. So that's very good information.
Thank you.
All right, so we jumped straight down to natural and cultural resources. Would we like to stay there? Are there, how would a new resident or a visitor, none of the SERP staff live in town, although some of us know the town really well. How would somebody describe Mattapoisett as a place?
You alluded to this, this is Mary, you alluded to this earlier, Grant, but I think one of the most critical components that I think of, which separates Mattapoisett from so many other towns in Massachusetts, is coastal.
Right. So at the first workshop we heard historic shipbuilding community. The village used to be a commercial hub and now it's mostly residential and it got this historic connection to the ocean and to the sea. I definitely think of it that way. What else? Maybe I'll put Mary Lou back on the spot. So she talked about visual features that you would like to see. So plaques, are there any efforts to kind of brand and keep signage standard in the village to make it seem a little bit more like a true historic district, historic place? Are there any efforts like that in place, or have people expressed interest in that? You certainly have the bones for it. It's a wonderful village. No?
Not that we're aware of.
Okay. Yeah, so go ahead.
I was going to say, can I circle back to kind of what we were talking about with culture and the, effects of Mattapoisett when a visitor comes. We had a great discussion on Wednesday about Harbor Day and a bunch of different town events that take place that folks really feel are signature of the town. Do you folks feel like there's anything that you think is really a signature, whether it be an event, a business, something like that, that we could, look more into?
So I was with a group that actually listed those, so I think that list was pretty comprehensive. And again, I think the communication thing we identified before is, the historic homes, the events, the locations. I don't think it's very clear to people where to find those. And I think that's one of the challenges.
Right. Yeah, so that goes back to Mary Lou's idea, or the Historic Commission's idea of effectively labeling and making it clear where those places are. And like I said, many cities and towns who have the rich history and the rich architecture that Mattapoisett has have chosen to really present and even market that through a web page and through maps and data. So we can think about that as part of the master plan for sure.
Grant,
Yes.
I just need to insert here that historic recognition of buildings is at the state level. It starts at the local level, but it's actually at the state level. It's a long, very involved process.
Right.
But it requires that these structures have a certain percentage of their facade maintained as it originally appeared. And I doubt very much that there are many homes left in Mattapoisett that would qualify. But our homes do have other, I'll call them pseudo-historic plaques. These are plaques that the homeowner has asked to have put on their building, and it talks about the first owners of that property. And maybe even what had taken place, like cordage or the shoemaker, and so on and so forth.
Sure.
So just making people aware that historic designation is a very convoluted process, and probably not one that would fit many, if any, buildings in Mattapoisett other than Center School.
So could we put the effort towards the pseudo-historic plaques? I mean,
Well, they are out there.
They are, okay.
Yeah, and so
I think they're great.
and that sort of, I don't want to, it's important to the state or an official historic society that something meets certain criteria, but that doesn't necessarily mean that things that don't officially meet that criteria aren't important to you as a community, aren't important to how you define your history in the village. So when I walk through the village, I don't do an assessment of what percentage of the facade is original. I say, this is a quaint, charming, I mean, I could be down on the Cape. I could be in Sconset on Nantucket, so it's not necessarily, there's a little bit about, if you really want to have a place officially designated by the Mass Historic Commission, yes, absolutely. But it's also important to note that you don't have to care what they think to say that your village is historic and amazing and wonderful. And we're very ready to help make that case through this master plan. So just a little note there. Why don't we, I think we'll circle back here, I'm sure, if it comes up naturally, but a nice connected idea or a nice connected element to me is open space and recreation. Do you think we could jump up there?
Actually, this is Mary. I just have one question in terms of
Sure.
talking about the signage and such, or the overall plan. In what kind of objective do we have here? What do we want for the future of Mattapoisett? Do we want lots and lots of signage so that we attract more and more tourists? I mean, is that one of our objectives, or is it to keep the village and the town relatively quiet and and so forth? Like, where is it that we want to go? What's the end overall objective, I guess, is one of the questions I have.
Excellent question. That's what this is all about, but it's not a question for Grant King or Taylor Perez or anybody from Serpent. That's why we're here.
Yeah, exactly. Going back to number one under the natural and cultural resources, about how would somebody describe Mattapoisett as it is now? And then I think another important question we as a group should talk about is is that something, are we happy with the way it is now, or is it that we want to change it?
Excellent. What would you say, Mary?
Well, I mean, I personally, I'm in the camp of, I really, 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 really like it the way it is now. And I mean, you were talking about, defining it, and you used some great words, coastal community, we said before, but also historic. I mean, as a townsperson and a member of this community, I love knowing about all of the history, and it's really, I think, great the way, even though they're only pseudo signs or whatever, I think that kind of thing is great. And more of that, it is great. When I think coastal, historic, the other word that keeps coming to my mind there aren't many words with Q, but I think about quiet and quaint.
We're playing Scrabble, not
Yeah.
two words. Yeah. Excellent. So let me ask, I love the kind of, this is true visioning that you're doing, asking big open-ended questions. So let me kind of follow up with that. So is growth necessarily, does that necessarily have to change the town and detract from that historic, quaint, quiet feeling? Does it have to, or is there a way for the town to grow and expand its tax base and provide, needed housing opportunities? Is there a way for that to happen that doesn't necessarily damage all of the things that you said you value so much?
Well, I think the question is not whether there will be or growth or not. I mean, I think by definition, there's always going to be growth and change, but how is it managed? And I mean, that's what we're here to do.
Exactly. How do you shape that growth? How do you focus it to areas you want to grow in, like the industrial park, or potentially areas that are along Route 6 that already have supportive infrastructure, and how do you steer it away from places where you don't want to grow? So an example I can share with you from the last master plan is it very clearly identified the need to discourage growth in the aquifer overlay district north of I-95 or I-195. And the town changed its zoning bylaw to do just that. And it raised minimum lot sizes and discouraged some growth in that way. There are also some kind of innovative ways to shift growth from parts of town that you don't want it into places you want. So that is why we're here, definitely. I think Mary Crane may have raised her hand, Sarah.
Yes, Grant, thank you. I wanted to add my own personal perspective about an example of growth or change in town that I think was done very well and is very attractive and hits on some points that dovetail well with elements of our zoning, and that happens to be the village development that was recently completed. And that happens to be a mix of retail with apartments or residences above. And it's done under the village business district element of the zoning bylaw, which encourages a mix of retail and residential uses. And I thought it was done very attractively, was certainly hits all the marks of being quaint and attractive for the community. It's, obviously, as you know, it's along Route 6. I thought it was a good example of here's how we can continue to expand and grow and attract more business and provide more housing opportunities for people in a well-done way. And that's just my own personal opinion. And it was something I liked seeing in town and would like to see that encouraged.
Excellent. So the master plan can look at, that bylaw that you mentioned was obviously successfully used, and we can look at ways to refine it and perfect it. For example, are there any incentives that we could provide to make sure that further growth takes place, assuming that the town agrees with Mary that it was attractive and well done and appropriately located. How can we incentivize similar outcomes through the zoning bylaw to make sure that that type of growth happens again? How can we guide the architectural and site planning through design guidelines that might not require, but would encourage, again, incentivize the private market to deliver those types of development outcomes that Mary and the town I'm hearing very clearly from this workshop and from the previous workshop that you value, that fit, but also meet development goals. That's excellent point, Mary, and that's what this plan is all about. Are there, before I move back to, I don't want to artificially move the conversation at all. So if something occurs to you, let's go back and stop. But I think we were going to transition to open space and recreation and talk a little bit about that. Would that be okay with everyone?
Grant, Don Fleming has been waving his hand for a little bit. I think he had something to add.
Who has been? Sorry.
Don Fleming.
Oh yeah, Mr. Fleming, Don Fleming.
Yes, this is Don Fleming. I apologize for signing on late, but I got tied up. There's a basic assumption there'll be growth, but my last reading of reports from the now retired town manager, he said there was no growth in our school community. So obviously the town has some statistical information that they should share with us as to the prospects of growth and what population will be growing, because that's going to determine the use of the land and the uses in the town. Are we going to become a retirement community? Are we not attracting young people? Do we want to attract young people? So I think that assumption of growth has to be looked at carefully. Thank you.
Excellent point. So let's take those, if I may, like kind of point by point. Yeah, some of that data, not all of it, but some of it is already up on the master plan webpage. So there's a data section where you can see that, yes, indeed, school attendance, student counts have been declining over time in town. You can also see that the population is stable or slightly declining since the last master plan. It grew and then dropped. So there has not been, exponential growth that may have been forecast in the old master plan. And then the other trend that you sort of touched on, Don, is that the town is aging. The overall population, the average age has gone up by 10 years in the past decade, from about, don't quote me, but from about the low 40s to the low 50s. So, right, what type of demand for services and facilities matches those demographic trends? And yeah, it's not safe to assume that there will be a lot of growth in town, but there is development, that's taking place, regardless of population, big population changes. Like the industrial park and like the cluster developments that are taking place, and like the Mattapoisett Village project that Mary just referenced. But very good. So we don't want to base our thinking on bad data or bad information. Any other thoughts before, again, we can bounce all around. That's what this is all about. And that's kind of the benefit of a small group like this. So let's do this. This is great. Shall we go back down to open space, or do you want to think about economic development since we're right here?
Why don't we try to close one, right? Why don't we try to go through open space completely and then complete that and then move on to others?
Sounds good, if it sounds good to everybody else. So we've talked about the village. We've talked about Route 6 a little bit. What parts of town are critical for protection and conservation?
Certainly the waterfront area.
Excellent. We can come back to that and talk a little bit about what that means.
Actually, Grant, how about continued or further protection of the aquifer district? Because
Absolutely.
that aquifer district serves not only as Mattapoisett's sole source of water, but I believe also Marion, Rochester, and Fairhaven utilize it.
Excellent. Excellent. Yep. What other places can you think of that should we maybe focus on when we think about conservation?
I don't know where this fits, but I have lived in a few places, and the utilization of the library services, I think we have an absolutely outstanding little library, and I don't know what other supports can be given to them. And as you've commented, there are more older people coming into the community. In the community, and my husband and I are certainly in that category. I don't know how you could commingle the senior citizen information to the library and the library reaching out to young families, older families. And I don't know where you would go to get that original information. I have a business in Waterville, Maine, and the library there has done an outstanding job of reaching out to the community, helping them with resumes, conducting job interviews to make them feel more confident when they go out.
Great. Excellent. So Kevin, sorry, we didn't finish open space. We will.
That's fine. No, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. Those are great points, though.
Yeah. So that would fit. I didn't catch who was talking. I think it might be, is your name Susan?
Susan Giguere, yeah.
Okay, Susan, thank you. Yeah, so master plans through their services and facilities elements identify those key town-owned, town-run facilities and services that we really want to help either improve or build upon or continue to support. So that's excellent. I know the library is very active and important in the town.
During our conversation the other night, there was a lot of talk about the Council on Aging that's co-located in Center School. A lot of nice things were said about that program. Maybe further expanding upon that and making sure that the information on that is townwide might be helpful.
So the content was good, but the communication was the improvement point. Is that what you're saying, Jacqueline?
Yeah, I think I was in the same group as you the other day.
We were. Again, I think a common theme is communication. And it's not the fault of the folks doing it now. It's just harder than it should be.
Okay. So the Council on Aging, and just in general, communicating where things are, how to access them. Do you have any thoughts, Kevin, on how the town could improve that just generally, or with regards to a specific service? Like through the web page, through emails, through cable access, any innovative approaches?
I don't know if it's innovative. Cable access, yes, it should be a little bit better. But I don't really want to be completely technology based because that's unfair to those that aren't either comfortable or have no access to it. But I do think that a uniform platform for distributing information would be beneficial. I think it's a pain for a lot of the departments to communicate out, and it's in the product that we're using or the process, and it should be a lot easier. And I'm not saying that there is a solution for it, but yeah, it's just frustrating that you have to, there's so many different ways to go find something, and you're wasting time trying to find it or you don't find it. And I think all the departments could benefit from that. I think that goes towards the library as well. I think the library is a great resource for communication, maybe for the hard goods or the things that need to be handed out. I think the library could serve as a central point for that.
Excellent. Really good. Yeah, Don.
Yeah, might I suggest that maybe the basic problem is the town's webpage. The
Oh, yeah.
department has their own hookup and we're responsible for keeping their portion of the webpage up to date. I think the information would be better. But the biggest problem is there is no one central place to go. And that has to be improved. If you turn on and the ranking, Google's ranking of everybody has to be aware. First box under the town of Mattapoisett is not going to be the town of Mattapoisett when you check it off on the internet. So
Okay.
it's critical. The information on the town web has to be improved. Thank you very much.
This is excellent. Keep it coming. Any other thoughts on these points here? So to kind of connect this back to a master plan, the way a master plan typically works is as we summarize and digest all of the information that we heard on Wednesday and that we hear today, and that we get through the survey and then we get through the rankings activities and the mapping activities, we'll do our best to identify, let's call it a half dozen to 10 main themes, main ideas that we're hearing from you, and clearly centralized, improved communication and coordination of information is one of those already in my mind, as an outsider that's listening to you guys talk about your town. So this is great. Did we want to go and try and knock out open space and recreation?
Sure.
I think you guys have identified two of the main ones that come to my mind again as an outsider. It's the waterfront, it's the coastal areas, and it's the it's the aquifer. It's not just important to your community, but it's important to several neighbors. My understanding, we haven't been able to meet with the town department heads yet, and with the water district. Mattapoisett River Valley Water is a commission, or I don't know the exact name yet, but we will. My understanding, having worked with and written the master plan for your neighbor Marion, is that system is in really good shape right now, but it's certainly important to keep it that way. So continued or further protection of the aquifer district is key. And we might need to explore interesting ways, innovative ways to do that above and beyond, raising minimum lot sizes and things like that.
Grant, it's Mary Crane. I just have a question about assisting in this process of prioritizing open space and recreation. I mean, typically for me, it would be useful to have a visual or information that, for example, like what properties in town are technically not protected, like what properties, maybe it's an open space in town, but what information do we know about it? Does it have any protections? Is it owned by the right entity? What properties are there right now that aren't truly protected that people could focus on it? And if they wanted to protect it, then follow whatever avenues there are to make sure that occurs. So it's sort of talking in a vacuum, like, well, what do we want to preserve? I'm like, well, what needs preserving is my question. Is there a way to have data to help people focus?
Absolutely. So for those of you who haven't been, part of a master plan process in the past, what we'll do next in some of that specialized information, and Mary, you and I have talked about this for 6 or 8 months now, is we'll do a build out analysis to see what parts of town have remaining development potential under the existing zoning bylaws. And then we'll sort of compare that with other layers of information, habitats, whether it's in the aquifer, whether it's whether there's a vernal pool there, or whether it has soils of high farming interest. And we'll sort of think about the suitability of land for either development or conservation from a technical GIS kind of math-based perspective. So you're going to have tons of data to inform those choices. Didn't want to overwhelm the visioning exercise tonight with that, but it's definitely going to be in play, and your point is super well taken. How, rather than, as we move forward in the plan, rather than thinking at the 30,000 foot cruising altitude, let's zoom in and look at it parcel by parcel. So we're definitely going to get there, but we didn't intend to do that tonight. And I think that was, but that was a good point. I said tonight, we always do these at night. So it's this morning.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
But definitely, I mean, excellent points. And you know, we kind of know these areas already. It's not like we haven't done our homework. We know it's like Oku Cove, Pine Island, down by the coast, the aquifer district. You know, we know this, but we're trying to get it from you guys too. Okay, so let's go to question number 2, and I think this is an important idea. And maybe this gets back to Kevin, kind of what you're thinking about is, do we know where things are? Do we know where these open spaces are, and whether they're open to the public, what their main purpose is? Is it private and we're supposed to stay off it so we don't damage habitats, or is this a walking path? Is this a bog we can walk on the trails through and see the active agriculture? So do you guys feel like you have equitable, easy access to these open spaces, these recreation spaces? Is it easy to know where they are and to get to them?
So I would say property owned by the land trust, it is, if the signage is there, accessibility is very clear. But out of my ignorance, I don't know if there are other assets not under land trust control that are accessible or not, or restricted. So someone coming from the outside would also be confused by that. And again, I'm not saying that's something wrong with that. I'm just unaware.
I don't know where it actually is, but if you come off the interstate going down, I think it's North Street, there's a sign that says Town Forest. I don't really know what that is.
Detroit Lakes. That's a good point.
And if I had young children, I'm sure I'd go exploring, but I don't have young kids with me.
Anybody
and
know?
I don't know how you brought in the land trust. There's certainly an important component. I think they own a fair amount of property within the town. And it's wonderful because they're saving, protecting land that might otherwise be gobbled up.
Absolutely.
I don't know of any, I don't know any land trusts or forest or anything like that.
I'm hearing someone talking, but I'm not sure if it's a comment or if it's background. You know, so to circle back to one of your thoughts is who owns what, where are they? How could we maybe connect them? So if we have like-minded conservation entity number 1, the land trust, and like-minded conservation entity number 2, Buzzards Bay Coalition, and there's a hole in the donut, can we fill it? How do we prioritize that? We have some mapping data already up on the interactive mapping website that we could show you. You know, we can sort of start doing that sensitivity and suitability analysis on the fly, or you know, you can rest assured that we've got that thinking in our minds, and we'll do that when we get to that type of build out exercise. So if you'd like to, we can dive into that map. It's up and ready and on the web page, or we could just keep the conversation kind of big picture. Either way is fine with us.
I'm kind of a brainstorming kind of person. When you were talking about potential networks, etc., you know that Lions is very big in the community, has a lot of membership. I don't know about Rotary, but those are 2 entities that could be very useful, perhaps gathering information as well as disseminating information.
So we're sort of kind of going back down to the services and facilities idea of coordinating information, coordinating communication, and you're saying that the private entities of the Lions Club and other civic groups might be of use there, of interest there. That's great. So I offered this, Nate's going to be tired of hearing me talk. I offered this example at the other workshop and on Wednesday night. Nate was in my group. Some communities who find that some of the burden of doing all of this is too great for the elected and appointed officials. Some of the appointed officials are part-time. They have really tried to use the master plan process to build and encourage increased volunteerism, increased stewardship and service in the community. And one town we worked with actually added that as a optional, kind of like we did with the climate and resilience element. They added that as an optional chapter to this plan, and really saw some nice changes and increased participation and communication come from it, because it can't all fall on the town. So you might want to keep that in mind about a way to move these sort of larger community development goals forward that don't necessarily fall all on the town. The town certainly has a role, and this master plan does, but I like you thinking about the Lions Club and other groups that could play important roles here. Very good comment. And was that Susan again? I just want to thank her.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. So let's see, we're approximately halfway through our time, which is great. We don't have to cover every subject matter or every element. I just want to let you guys know where we are, and what's the next thought that we'd like to share? Don.
I'm curious as to what is the purpose in the master plan, in your opinion? I'm hearing some conflicts. We have people that want to conserve land for conservation purposes, environmental purposes. Other people want to conserve land which will effectively control population. They're afraid of developments. And this gets back into my initial proposition that growth is the essential agreement we have to come to. What do we want for growth? We want to grow and become a elderly community. We want to grow and just become a summer colony. We want to grow and be healthy and bring in young people. At the prices of land in Mattapoisett, we have to be looking at multiple housing to house our youth. Historically, in this town, many of the young people had used our public housing and built up enough equity in their bank account to buy a lot, and then built a house and moved out. We had a circulation. People didn't stay there for long periods of time. So I think, what are we going to actually address? The trimmings, or are we going to actually address what we think is healthy for this community? Thank you.
Sure.
So my view is, I think the master plan should cover a little bit of everything. It shouldn't dictate one direction, but it should facilitate the ability to have options, Don. But I might be wrong. Grant, do you want to comment?
Well, so Don, you may have missed I think you came in after the first part of my presentation, which covered a little bit of this, so that it's totally fine. Basically, SERPED is agnostic about all of this. So this is up to you as a community to figure that out. So I don't have any opinions about this, nor do my colleagues. What we're here to do is identify those main goals that you have as a community and balance them, right? So, I mean, it's not this plan, I'm certain will not advocate for no growth or some growth or all growth. It's all, you know, we have to acknowledge the reality that the town will probably grow, but it's how do you want to grow? How do you grow where it makes sense, right? Where there's already water, sewer, infrastructure, available land that doesn't have a habitat right underneath it or the aquifer underneath it. And how do you guide growth to where it belongs? And that's a conversation we're going to have in detail. You know, this is a 24-month process. And some of those questions I'm hearing you guys, Mary observing, how do we know where we conserve? How do we know where to build? You guys are already right where the rubber meets the road. What we're here to do is try to guide you through all of those choices and not have any opinions about it. Master plans, to go back to Kevin's point, master plans typically identify a handful of goals for each of the chapters of the master plan that we're looking at: land use, economic development, etc. And they try and identify areas of consensus and ways to achieve those goals. And then they match strategies to those goals. So ways to make those goals real. Let's imagine that you want to shift growth from the aquifer to a specific area on Route 6. This is just imagination. I'm not saying that's true. So there are tools to do that. And we would say, consider a transfer of development rights bylaw, incentivize your existing village, what is it called, the village district. Make sure that future infrastructure investments happen in the areas where you want to grow and not in the aquifer. You know, so we identify those strategies, and then for each of those strategies, we'll identify the main steps, who's in charge, example success stories from across the Commonwealth or across the nation. We'd identify performance measures so you can see if you're doing it right and how to measure success. We'll offer those examples where they overlap. So that's what a master plan typically does.
Well, if you look in your files, I think the last master plan you people did was entitled Master Plan for 2020.
Are you referring to a SARP-Ed document?
I had it. I will be able to find it within a couple of days.
Was it called Vision 2020?
I believe so.
Yeah. Okay. So that was a regional document, sort of a policy plan that SERP-Ed put together a long time ago. I think that was more regional and not, if I'm thinking about the right document, that was more regional and less town specific. So it was more kind of like aspirations for the whole region that SERP-Ed serves. But again, what's our role here? We are your assistants. We're going to help you do everything I just described, but we don't identify the goals. You as a community do. You're members of the public and elected and appointed officials.
Grant, this is Mary Dermody. What you said just a moment ago before that was really, really helpful to me, and kind of what I was asking earlier on about, you know, what is our objective here? You know, what are we trying to accomplish? And what you just said, I think, was setting up goals in each area, but the overarching objective is to how do we guide the growth? And that's really helpful for me to think about. Thanks.
Sure, great.
And Grant, Mary Crane, just like one example from the prior master plan is that there was a specific goal in there that, or recommendation, that the zoning in the aquifer district be changed from, at the time it was, for example, was R40, and they recommended that it be changed to R80, which essentially doubled the minimum lot size from 40,000 square feet to 80,000 square feet. So that recommendation was in the master plan, and the town took the action at a town meeting and revised the zoning. So that's just one example of specific goals that can be laid out in a master plan, and the town can actually make such change by bringing it before town meeting for the residents to examine and vote upon. So a very specific action tool.
Excellent. Yep. Right. That was what I was referring to before. And maybe the next step is to consider, like Nathan said, further protecting the aquifer through other specific changes to your zoning bylaws. Excellent point.
Yeah, and actually, we're starting the process of restructuring the zoning bylaw with the intent that once it's been restructured to then start updating the zoning bylaws. So, you know, even some of the ideas, I mean, depending on timeline, some of the ideas could be even implemented prior to the final publishing of the updated master plan.
Right. Excellent. Yeah, and hope this process. I was at your planning board meeting when Judy Barrett showed that report. Hopefully, you can use this master plan process and build awareness of that's necessary. Restructuring the zoning bylaw is very likely necessary to achieve some of these more programmatic changes to the bylaw itself. It's good. So I was going to invite all of you really briefly, everybody, these are excellent ideas. And I would invite you to please, Mr. Fleming, Don, you mentioned the website needs work. Please check out this project's webpage and look at those frequently asked questions.
I will.
Look at some of the example master plans that we have linked up there, hopefully, and make sure that, you know, some of these larger, like, what is this all about? What will the document look like? Hopefully that will answer some of those questions. And if not, reach out to us or to Mary, and we'll hopefully do our best to clarify.
I'm hoping there is a very intense discussion. This town has had 2 annual elections where I believe seats on the school committees were left uncontested and vacant, and the school committees were appointed. That indicates to me a problem. And I think growth is the issue. I think if we really get that and discuss it and get a cross section and debate the issues, I'll be happy. Planning board, I know, takes the position they have no ability with regard to protecting elderly. And they should be aware that's a state law. They should be protecting, they have to abide by the protections under the state law for the elderly. And they take the position they don't have that. Thank you.
I'm sorry, protect who? The elderly?
The elderly. We have,
okay.
We have a complex that everybody is saying is a great complex here. They had housing on the upper floors, and the planning board didn't recognize that they insist that an elevator be there so it would be available for the elderly. And in fact, talked to the building inspector and went out and got a waiver for them. So they didn't have to install an elevator.
Sorry, which location?
On Route 6 at the end of Church Street, directly across the street.
So
Is that the new development?
At the development over at
Right.
the Windswept Village?
And I showed up at the hearing and I asked if they install elevators in accordance with the state statute that required it. And they then promptly got a waiver from the town. And we didn't protect our elderly. Those would have been ideal apartments for our elderly.
And the planning board was the board that you went in front of for this?
Yes.
okay.
Okay.
To bring this, let's bring this back out to the kind of thinking for a master plan is, so I'm hearing that the town may want to consider additional ways to think about accessibility to, so that's something for in the services and facilities element that the town could clearly pursue. The American with Disabilities Act, self-assessment, and transition planning to ensure that, you know, I don't know the specifics of what you're referencing, Dawn, but, you know, to make sure that things like that are addressed directly by town planning documents. The other thing we could think about if we're thinking about meeting the needs of seniors, this came up in both groups on Wednesday night, is what types of housing units seniors might need. I heard a very clear description that seniors want to stay in town. They love living in Mattapoisett, but it's difficult to find a place to downsize to. It's difficult to find a place that they can afford on a fixed income. How can the master plan help address that? You know, I don't want to put words in your mouths tonight, but we definitely are hearing that. And I heard that when I met with the Council on Aging about 6-9 months ago. So those are the types of things, Dawn, that, you know, the master plan, we can't go back in time, but we can certainly, you know, put our attention on accessibility and how the plan can support outcomes for seniors. As we know, the town is aging, there are seniors, there are lots of seniors in town, and that's just apparently getting more and more the case. Do you have any thoughts to share on senior housing, Don?
The senior housing, I do not, because I think that you just need more information. Obviously, we need transitional housing for the seniors. We're going to see a major change in our thoughts about nursing homes. And we have to have, you know, places for seniors who want to downsize and move and stay in the community. And, but, you know, what the solution is, no, but this is why I want to understand what our master plan is going to be. And again, I keep going back to it's people. We describe it as growth, but it's people. The people in this town, this is the loveliest town I've ever lived in, right? When you were describing, when you walked through the village, my thought was, you're walking, and all I can think of is heaven. So, thank you.
Excellent.
I'd like to put my 2 cents worth in with regard to demographics. For a number of years, we've been thinking about the white wave of people who are over 50 or 60 as being the ones who are running the show. And I was kind of surprised to realize that, in fact, a population between, say, 25 to 40, or I may even be too high on the 40 piece, but that there are a lot of younger people who will, I guess, pick up the cudgel and move forward. And the idea of trying to figure out places where they can, which are affordable for them to be able to settle in order to keep great ideas coming in a community. When the plan is looking at properties or tracts of land, maximizing the building space that's there and provide, or I shouldn't say, the builders would make available play areas for children, for lack of a better word, so that you wouldn't necessarily have to go out as a family to find new things, or your properties could be smaller if you had a central park in which your children could be playing. I think young people are an important component of developing a community.
Excellent. Yeah, we heard that.
Yeah.
We heard that a little bit too on Wednesday night, that we can't just think about, particularly let's take housing. When we're thinking about housing, please don't just think about seniors. Also think about young households and professionals that might want to live in town. I think, Nate, I think it was you that observed that in order to live in town, you know, you need 2 professional incomes in order to be able to afford to live in town, and that puts a burden on on the household. And so yeah, the very, very nice point, Susan. Think about young people in our planning as well, young households, make sure that their ideas and their influx of, you know, energy and community happen here too. Good, very good.
Grant, if I may, the other night that we heard that a variety of housing stock is something that the town could really use. And I think that would really help encourage younger people. Is there any other categories that are maybe missing from that? We talked about younger people, we've talked about elderly. Is there anything in between that's not necessarily being addressed? I also know Mattapoisett has a number of seasonal residents.
Any thoughts on that? Okay.
Mary Dermody, I'm not sure it goes under the category of housing, but the comment about seasonal residents is just, and there's an awful lot of Mattapoisett that focuses on the summer season and doing things for everybody, which of course include the seasonal residents, but is there, just as we said, let's focus on making sure we have plenty of young people because they provide a lot of energy. It might also be interesting if there's some way that we could tap more into the brains and ideas that seasonal people have that come from a variety of places, you know, influx of new ideas. I'm really kind of just stream of consciousness here, but.
That's what this is all about. That's great.
I think in the meeting, the breakout group that I was in, it was pointed out by one of the people because they were seasonal or something. They live here, but they're not a voter. So I don't know if that'll preclude some people from participating. So I'm not saying it's a true statement, but I'm wondering if they're fully vested in participating.
So we should look into what the requirements are to vote.
Yeah.
Okay.
As it sees, I'm kind of a strange bird. I'm a seasonal resident in Wareham and a winter resident or a year-round resident here in Mattapoisett. And it's my understanding is that you can participate in pretty much anything as a seasonal resident, but you can't, of course, vote at a town meeting. But I think that seasonal residents are extremely interested in what they have vested in the town and want to participate in what's going on that will impact that.
That's good. I didn't have any insight into that, Mary.
Okay. Since we're talking about, you know, things we heard at the last workshop, and I was wondering if there are any thoughts. We heard a lot about transportation and circulation, a lot about the bike path, a lot about Route 6. Can I ask some just general questions there? Are you familiar with the bike path project? What do you think? Route 6 is a main artery through town. What does its future look like in your ideal mind? Can I ask those questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I certainly am aware of the bike paths. I don't use them myself, but if I had family visiting, I would encourage them to use them. I think anything that we can have in the community that would spotlight things for families and groups of people to participate in.
Great.
The transportation piece, I don't really have a knowledge base of. I've spent a fair amount of time the last several years up in Maine, and the transportation there is not conducive to people to use on a public basis. So I really couldn't give you input on that.
This is Mary.
I'd like to.
Just a quick question, a quick comment on the bike path. The bike path that's under a connector that's currently under construction between Mattapoisett Neck and Goodspeed Island. I am someone who uses the bike path, and I have very mixed feelings about it. And I just want to make this comment. I'm very excited about the future potential to be able to ride for such a long distance from the village. I mean, basically, we'd be able to go from Mattapoisett Village all the way to Fairhaven Village. But on the other hand, that the part that is now being constructed is a place that I used to love to walk as a path, and very serene and nature filled and so forth. And it saddens me to go there now and see all these big steel girders, and it'll be great when there's people on it riding bikes, but when it's not being used, it's really kind of ugly and an eyesore on the landscape in terms of it being a beautiful natural landscape, and that's no longer the case. So I just think we want to be careful about how we impose man-made structures upon the natural ones. And I mean, it's a trade-off, because I'm thinking also now about, building accessibility ramps and so forth and so on. And, but in a way that so that it's done so that it's as non-impactful as possible to the landscape.
Yeah. Excellent. Context sensitive, low impact development, things that match the context.
Yeah.
Oh, Grant,
It's a trade-off. I mean, it's a trade-off. It's going to be fabulous to be able to bike and not have to bike on Route 6. And that's going to be incredible. But at the same time, we've kind of ruined this beautiful landscape that we had.
I'm going to put my my colleague Jackie on the spot, who's our resident bike expert. Jackie, this also came up in the group I was in on Wednesday night. Are you aware? Can you?
I'm happy to talk about that for a minute. So a lot of the requirements that were put in place on that are federal requirements. So they had to design it to specific standards. They also, because they were crossing such sensitive areas, they had to be elevated above it so as not to disturb it as much. So unfortunately, it doesn't look very visually appealing, but a lot of the choices that were made in that were to protect that natural habitat from having the impact of people riding on top of it or sort of disrupting that. There's also a lot of water over there that needs to flow freely. So a lot of the decisions were made based on that. It also had to withstand hurricane force things. A lot of regulations were put in place after Hurricane Katrina that unfortunately impacted the design of that. So the good news is it'll be around for a long time, and a lot of habitat protection was taken into account.
Yeah, I mean, it's each step of the way. It's a trade-off, but I just think it's important that I mistakenly, and of course, I didn't really think about all of those important components, but had more of a vision of a boardwalk type, natural wood, excuse me, a kind of structure. And I think it's just important that we be cognizant of what it is that is going to be imposed on the landscape when we talk about and think about those kinds of options. That's all.
There's also options in funding. So if you use federal funding, you have to use federal design standards. If you use town funding, you have more flexibility that way.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Great.
And I haven't ridden on it yet. I'm sure once I start riding on it, I'll feel differently.
I know a lot of and I don't want to speak for the bike committee in town or for the Friends of the Bike Path, but I know that a lot of natural and historical and cultural resources were taken into account when throughout the design.
Thanks.
I think when I put Jackie on the spot, someone else was either talking or going to talk. Did that person, if I'm right, would that person like to continue?
Thank you, Grant. My name is David, and I'm by telephone only. I had a problem with my computer this morning. Apologize. I use the bike paths often, and my issue is in crossing Route 6, like Mattapoisett Neck Road, and over by the police station, the new fire station. Perhaps looking at additional crosswalks or flashing lights that would people go very fast in both of those areas on Route 6, and it's always quite an issue to cross. Also, I'm looking forward to the opening of the rest of the bike trail. Some of the bike trails on Cape Cod have really maintained some of the beauty of the land alongside, and hopefully the extension will do the same. So that's my comment.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Are you talking about the crossing at Mattapoisett Neck to go kind of into
Yes,
Rochester?
Mattapoisett Neck Road on Route 6. Across from the diner. Because that's where the trail ends now. I cross it often, and it takes a while to have because the curve on the road there, the sight distance is very limited. It's a risky biking across there. So perhaps, a crosswalk, or looking at additional crosswalks or flashing lights would be something to consider.
I know there was a pretty severe accident with a bicyclist there, maybe over the past year or so. So that's definitely something to think about.
And David, David,
yes.
When you get your computer up and running, please visit the web page for this workshop. And that URL is serped.org/master-plan/discovery-workshop. You should be able to link to all of this from the town webpage. But on that,
yes.
There's a mapping exercise. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that exact intersection came up in, I think, both groups on Wednesday. And I have seen someone already put a point at that intersection in the mapping exercise. So if you would kindly either put a point there on the map yourself, or you have the option of saying, I agree or disagree with those comments. That input would be very valuable. And for any of the place-specific ideas about locations or spots in town that you want to tell us about. So Mary, maybe you can comment on, let's make the architecture of this crossing a little bit, let's think about ways to make it match a little bit better. Those place-specific ideas, please put them on this map. We've heard it tonight, but the more information, I keep saying tonight, this morning, I'm on autopilot. We've heard it, but the more you can put it on a map for us and help us understand, the better it'll be. So sorry to interrupt you, Nate. Go ahead, man.
No, I was going to say, my sense with this is Route 6 acts as a major barrier for crossing from south to north or north to south, in exception to the village area. Outside of the village area, I think there's maybe a total of 2 or 3 crosswalks throughout the whole stretch of it. Between, it's mostly, there's sightline distances on parts of Route 6, and then speed is a major issue throughout there, because if you do get a chance to cross, you're kind of taking your life in your hands to do it. And, Wednesday night, that was even stated as being a situation at the crosswalks in the center of town where there are flashing lights to let you cross. I mean, drivers, just aren't paying attention. But, I would say technically, the first opportunity, if you're walking from Fairhaven to cross Route 6 to the north side or to the south side, is probably the better part of a mile into town at Old Hamantown School's crossing. Otherwise you are just doing it at your own risk.
Right, and I think when they complete the new fire station, you might consider a crosswalk at that point as well. Having tried to get my bicycle across there last week, really, cars go very fast by the police station.
Yeah, I agree. I use that crossing. It's not a crossing at the moment. I make that a crossing, and it's a very risky because of the line of sight. My understanding, just as a positive point, my understanding is that they are going to putting in some sort of a traffic signal there for the firehouse, for the engines to exit. So it would not be a huge, and that's something that's going to happen before this master plan is done. I think that might be something that they will hopefully put in a crosswalk with a button to push there, because that's a key access point to the village without having to go all the way over to North Street if you're coming from the eastern part of town.
Mary, did you hear that they were putting a light in, or they were hoped to put a light in?
My understanding is there will be a traffic signal. Now, the type of traffic signal, I don't know.
Well,
yeah, it would have to be a yellow flashing warning light. It can't be a tricolor.
Good.
Right, so that light is, based on when the fire station came before the planning board for site plan review, They had not put in for a traffic signal warrant yet. They were hoping to do that. And it would be a situation where it is a flashing yellow on Route 6 and a red light facing the fire station. And when the apparatus need to leave, it's then a stop. I don't think there is any planned signalization for a crosswalk.
Right. The question is that something that could be included in that? I mean, if the pole is there and the electronics are there and so forth, I mean, that would be such a great place to be able to walk across and then just go down Hubbard Lane to get to the village. I mean, that's what I do now, but it's really, really dangerous.
There may be design considerations for putting a crosswalk in there. So it'd be great to apply for it, but it may not become reality. I have a question though, Nathan.
Yep.
Is there a possibility of an Opticon system being put into the other tricolor intersections?
What does that mean?
Part of
so Opticon
you're referring to
the system that allows the police and the fire to change the signal in advance of entering into the intersection. You see that at the intersection of 240 and Route 6 in Fairhaven and other intersections in Fairhaven. So it's the thing that if you go through the light and they activate it, it's a flashing light. And what it's done is it's allowed the fire department or police department to easily pass through the intersection by changing the traffic flow.
So it's kind of a remote emergency.
Light switcher, yes, or something like that, yeah.
If I may, are you talking about the Route 6 intersections? So Route 6 is MassDOT's road. So in order to put those in at the signals, they would be responsible for that. And they will, if they're coming in to do a project, they will upgrade those if the town already has that equipment on their vehicles, which I'm not.
We don't.
Right. You don't. So first the town has to make that sort of investment and then MassDOT will do it. It's sort of a chicken and the egg scenario. It's come up a lot in other towns, but.
Which means it probably won't happen in the next 20 years.
I do believe it was discussed, Serped did a study on Route 6 last year, and I believe it was discussed in that report as well.
Actually, going back to that Route 6 study from last year, I think a lot of the issues that the public have with Route 6 were included in that. I think there was another kind of mapping exercise. Is that something that's also kind of integrated into this exercise here? Or could be polled to be used?
There was a good amount of public outreach as part of the Route 6 study, and that study will be used to inform the transportation section of this document. But we also want to hear if anyone has any additional comments on Route 6, because we might be reaching a group of different people. Or I have seen Don's hand coming up. I'm not sure if he still wants to talk, but I did see your hand come up a couple times.
That was my memory, that the state had done a study, and that study included a bike path on Route 6. And I remember at the time I had some concern that was silly. If we're building a bike path off Route 6, we're going to end up with the state making a choice, and we may not have the funds in what we consider the best choice.
Yeah. So when you use state funds, or when the state does improve one of their roads, they have a healthy transportation policy directive that they're beholden to, so that they need to incorporate all users of a road. So they have to look at pedestrians, they have to look at bicyclists, they have to look at transit. So they try to approach it from a holistic standpoint. But they also are constrained by space and other factors. But it's really up to the town to kind of push for what the town wants as well. So there needs to be kind of advocacy on the point by half of the town.
I would add to that, we have a great asset in town. We have the chairman of the House Transportation Committee living here. And I think if we start early and speak to Mr. Strauss, it might have an effect upon the state highway department.
Absolutely can help.
Jackie, could I ask that if there were comments supporting what Don was just talking about and the idea of where we would as a town residents where we would want to have things done, go back to the comprehensive plan and kind of put more comments in there? Is that what I think I'm hearing?
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Were you saying that we
I
should?
always have a funny way of talking. Grant was saying earlier, encouraging the gentleman who was on the telephone to go into the comprehensive plan and make comments of this type there as well. So it's reinforcing a concern that some of the residents have.
Yeah, I would encourage everyone to do that for any topic this evening, but
Yeah.
especially if there's location-based things, we want to know that as well.
Right, on the map, or just say it again in an email, or say it again right now. We're writing it down, and rest assured, again, if you go to the document the project webpage, in it you will see a document library, and that report that you have just referenced, I think Nate and others, that report, that Route 6 corridor study is there. We know about it. We wrote it. We understand it. We're just not trying. We're not quite there yet in terms of using that as gospel. We want to, we want to hear from you already. We want to come back and not start the process all the way over again, but hear from potentially new people, different people. And then on that timeline that I shared at the beginning, then when we get into the specific workshops, we'll drive down deeper into the data and tell you what we heard, talk in more detail about the constraints that working with state funding and federal funding puts on there. But that's really kind of like, we're not there yet, because we don't want to artificially constrain the conversation.
So is there anywhere outside of Route 6 that people have concerns? The other night we heard a lot of, there are a lot of narrow roads in town that might have some safety concerns, or any specific intersections. Brant Island Road came up as a narrow road.
Yeah, that isn't, one thing that I always hear is a lack of safe pedestrian access along North Street. It is a 35-mile-per-hour zone. However, people will, pretty regularly travel at 40 or 45 miles an hour along there, with no sidewalk.
Are you speaking of North Street in the village, or North Street between Route 6 and the highway, or north of the highway, or the whole thing, or?
Basically from, there's a sidewalk on North Street on the west side to a point just past 195. So then from 195 north.
Thanks.
Then, that's, I also hear that for Mattapoisett Neck Road and Brant Island Road and a lot of the town. All the roadway networks, it's kind of rare to find a sidewalk unless you're in the village or on Route 6 itself. And because, a lot of these speed limits were set when Mattapoisett was more rural, you don't have these sidewalks, you have these kind of higher speed limits, and that's kind of creates unsafe access.
And I think it's important to note that Brant Island Road and Mattapoisett Neck Road, those are main direct access points to the bike path, which maybe someone wants to walk to from somewhere because the parking is limited or something like that, and having the ability to walk there would be very helpful.
I'd like to chime in on this walkability issue, if I may. This is Mary Lou. It's the high rate of speed with which people go over the posted speed limit that is number one, a big fat problem, no matter where you are in town, including in the village where I walk almost daily, along Water Street, Main Street. People barrel through the community. I'm a big advocate for additional posting of signage because there really isn't adequate signage, especially in the village. I live on North Street. I've walked it for 30 years. The cars are more, the cars are faster. So it's a flagrant problem with the motorists not adhering to the posted speed limits and volume. Thank you.
I mean, I'd even say too, you know, a lot of times, you know, it's rare for me to see a Mattapoisett police vehicle on any of these kind of less than, well, Route 6, doing any kind of speed limit enforcement. You do see the trailer around, and that's good for information, but, you know, I kind of feel like there should be a more proactive approach to trying to enforce the speed limits throughout town. I mean, it's not untypical to see a police vehicle sitting at, what is it, Jack's Kitchen in the center of town, or over towards the Fairhaven line. But, you know, I live on Mattapoisett Neck Road. I don't see, you know, anybody trying to check the speeds of vehicles, and it may just be the frequency of my travel on the roadway or the times that I travel it, but I just don't see it. And I wonder if a better presence of the police on these less than main roads would, you know, have a positive impact on the speeds that people are traveling.
Nate, my husband, and I would concur with you.
So when we look, when SERPED as an agency looks at speed issues on roads, what we like to recommend is generally like a 3-part thing. We look at signage, is there signage there? We look at enforcement, does the road regularly receive enforcement, which also can be problematic on roads like Mattapoisett Neck because of narrowness, so you got to kind of target it in specific locations. And we also look at the built environment. Is there something about the road that is encouraging people to speed? Is it's very straight with very few turns? Weirdly enough, the presence of sidewalk and the presence of people helps to slow traffic as well. Are there lane markings? Are there things like that? So we call it our like 3-fold approach when we look at things like that. But definitely signage and enforcement are a big part of that. Is there any specific place that has that sort of lacking built environment that could maybe benefit from something along those lines? Some traffic calming necessarily? Mary, I think I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to third that comment that this speeding is definitely a problem, and it appears to me to becoming more and more of a problem. And I'd have to think about your question about, are there any places where the road might be somehow adjusted to help the problem? But clearly, if we did a review of the signage and perhaps had a focus on enforcement, that would help.
And if you think of any of those locations, please feel free to email or comment on the website.
Put them on the map.
Yeah.
And master plans, you know, recommend they do this. They do exactly what Jackie just outlined. They identify locations, they see what variables are in play, and they make recommendations based on those variables. So that this is good. We're getting, you know, we're getting into the nuts and bolts of it already.
Grant, there was a study that was completed about making modifications to parts of Old Marion Road, Church Street, Water Street. So there is, and it's fairly new study that was done, and Nate may remember this better than I do. And, you know, additional parking in the village area, et cetera, et cetera. And they did talk about this issue on Water Street, between Water Street and the intersection of Neds Point Road, where the cars fly down, up and down that hill. That's an area that's a big fat problem.
Yeah, and then
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I do recall a couple of years ago, and I'll identify these on the map, but, you know, I think it was Chief Lyons, myself, and Bonnie had kind of done a pseudo study of the Brain Island Road and Mattapoisett Neck Road bike path crossings and potential safety improvements. But, you know, in the end, it kind of amounted to nothing. I mean, unless, you know, maybe the Neck Road portion is part of the current construction phased bike path to be improved. But, you know, it also kind of feels like we do these things and we study these things, and then it ends up on a shelf in town. So I'll identify those two spots as safety hazards and areas that may benefit from some sort of traffic calming improvements.
Nate, was that part of the bike and ped plan that Mattapoisett developed, or was that a separate effort?
I'd have to go back to my emails to figure out which it was, because then at the same time during that study, we were looking at the speed limits on Mattapoisett Neck Road and potential ways to work around or reduce the speed limit from the posted 40 down to something lower. But I guess because it's posted and it was studied, resulting in the posting, that there was really nothing that could be done. But I'll find the emails and let you know.
Okay, thank you. Susan?
I've got a lot of traffic in and out of my house, so I didn't want to make a lot of noise. This perhaps is a devious woman speaking, but at these critical points that you're talking about, Nathan, and Don had, or maybe it was Kevin, had mentioned the fact of the town's fiscal restraints, perhaps utilizing the service clubs like Lions or the Land Trust to put a big old sign or some other thing that would engage people so they'd either get off their phones or really pay attention to the road. Take advantage of advertising the bike path, as well as an attempt to slow people down, and the cost would not be a burden to the town, but they might become a burden for one of the service clubs. Do you know what I meant?
Yeah, I think it's always important to think outside the box about possible solutions to stuff like that. I think that utilizing your town services and reducing the tax debt is always.
But I have no clue about parameters of state and federal road guidelines that would preclude you from doing something like that.
So just to jump in real quick, this last 15, 20 minutes has been excellent. I don't want to cut it short. We've got about 15 left. I'd like to really quickly, I'm going to steal about 90 seconds of that 15 minutes and talk a little bit about how do we make sure these plans don't sit on the shelf. This is one of the frequently asked questions that I referred Mr. Fleming to on the website. You know, we hear this a lot, and there's a two-part answer to this. SERPED will do its part, and then it's up to the town to do your part. For our part, as your consultant, we will make a plan that is concise, easy to understand, graphically engaging, beautiful to read, that sits that lists the main items that you wanted to accomplish and how to accomplish them, kind of like a recipe or an instruction manual. And that's the way we've approached master plans in the past that have led to a goal, strategy like a bylaw change or participating in a state program. And you can draw a direct line between that and millions of dollars of MassWorks grants. So I'm trying to tell you that we set up a structure that, if it is implemented and acted upon by the town, has a proven track record to make change in communities. That's where that second part of my answer comes in. It is up to you as a community to implement these plans. And none of us live in town. We're going to make sure that it's easy and engaging. And ideally, the master plan process that's just starting, we've got about 2 years left. Ideally, what it does is it creates optimism. It creates excitement. It creates people that believe in the work and become local champions of the work. And so that's what I'm hoping. I mean, I'm hoping you guys here believe in this and are here because you want to support positive change. Once we figure out what those areas of consensus are, it's up to you to go to town meeting, to bring the Lions Club members there to town meeting to make sure they vote for the bylaw change you believe in. it's up to you guys to bring this through to the finish line. So it's a multi-pronged approach. The master plan identifies consensus. It makes it easy to understand, but it's up to the community really to implement it. So just a little, you know, background on how this might move forward.
Grant, could I jump in on that?
Sure.
My name's Dave McIntyre, and I think you're absolutely correct on those comments. I have seen over the years that sometimes the zoning and regulatory issues and environment are sometimes the largest roadblock to implementing some of these visions that we are working on right now. So I think it would be important to try to coordinate zoning and regulations into this whole process.
Great. Yeah, I mean, the good news is your planning board's already on that. They're trying to improve the usability and update the zoning bylaw itself so that it's easier to understand and navigate, and it's consistent with state and federal law and judicial decisions. They're working on that right now, and then hopefully this process will identify those key changes to the zoning that will enable some of this more outside the box creative outcomes for the town.
Yep, good, very good, thank you.
So Taylor, would you mind really quickly showing us where we maybe haven't talked? I think this has been a great conversation. I don't want you to mishear this. You guys are the local champions. You're here today, and these are amazing ideas. We just need, you know, it needs to continue forward through the implementation of the plan. As you scrolled by, Taylor, I think I saw climate and economic development. We didn't really talk too much about that. Would you guys spend our last 10, 15 minutes together on either of those subjects?
Actually, I did have, it's actually kind of multi-pronged between the climate and resilience planning and then the public facilities. But I understand last year, or maybe the year before, the town had an opportunity to get involved with the Massachusetts green communities and passed on that, which I almost feel like the implementation of the Massachusetts green communities would kind of act as that would improve facilities, but then also be a participating force to reduce climate and resilience planning needs. And I kind of feel like that's something that should be re-examined, both for the energy efficiency aspects, but then also kind of participating in the solution to climate change and the need for resilience planning.
Excellent. Yeah, so a little background. One of our SERP Ed colleagues who is going to be here today, Eric Arbini, I believe he is working currently with your new town manager to participate in the Green Communities program under the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources. I believe that's in the works. So SERP Ed works with DOER. We're sort of, they're like, what is it called? I have the words escaping me. We work with them in our region to help cities and towns participate and report on that program. And I think that's happening right now, but Eric will be ashamed of me that I don't know that for sure, but we'll definitely report back about that, Nate. That's really good. Susan.
Yes, I don't know what the structure here in Massachusetts is. I'm much more familiar with Maine. Within the communities, either by county or by town, there's an economic and community development contact or relationship that perhaps might seek out some of the ideas that might be there that the town manager is too busy to focus on, or someone else within town government.
So is your question, is there a similar agency or
right
in Massachusetts?
And I kind of figure that perhaps there is, and I just am not aware of it.
There are a few, and we're one of them. So we're your official economic development district. So that's a federal designation
Oh,
under
okay.
the U.S. Economic Development Administration, USEDA. So we work with that agency to develop projects with cities and towns and fund infrastructure improvements, water, sewer, bridges, roads, interchanges with roadways. That's one of the main things that we do. There are also, chambers of commerce in the region and other business groups, that work in their specific areas of expertise. But to bring this back to a master plan, economic development elements of a master plan typically do, I think Nate used a great phrase, a multi-pronged approach to economic development that would involve us, that would involve agencies like Mass Development or this Commonwealth's Economic Office of Housing and Economic Development. So there are multiple agencies and entities in play to meet economic development goals, and we're one of them.
Okay. It sounds like you're speaking, though, more as what I would be familiar with the term council of governments to help cities and towns promote brownfields, etc. What I'm talking about is more a small business development center kind of folks that pull together a chamber of commerce, a town, a kind of development that the town wants and help push that through.
Okay. I hear you. Yeah. So that would be one of, a chamber of commerce or a small business association. That would be another, depending on the goals we identify for the master plan, that would be another entity, to reach out and work with. Nate, you asked a question at the last workshop that I didn't know the answer to, and Taylor is.
Which one was that?
There was only one. No, I'm just.
Was this the one about the houses? The age of them?
Taylor's right there right now.
Oh, the flood.
Yeah, and I asked her about that, and part of my answer, architectural changes, was right. So platforms and stilting and sump pumps and things like that. But maybe I can put you on the spot, Taylor, to talk a little bit more about question number 2. Do all town residents, in terms of resilience, have necessary tools, such as the issue with this question is we kind of go from the architectural, proper heating and cooling and insulation, to a bigger picture, flood planning, flood insurance, things like that. But Taylor, can I defer to you and put you on the spot there?
Yeah, for sure. I think you covered the majority of it just now. It manifests in different ways, but largely how adequate and comprehensive is folks' flood insurance? Do they have flood insurance? Can they afford it? Things like that. It can be at the municipal level, so it can be, do folks have disaster planning, especially if there's like flash flooding, can seniors get in and out, things like that, and architectural. So do we, I guess the question kind of manifests is, do we think that folks have access to all of those different resources that are so important for a coastal community?
Because I have a familiarity with regard to flood insurance, and now where we're located is now close to $10,000 a year. I would wonder whether or not there might be an opportunity to create a cooperative for people to be able to purchase more affordable flood insurance, and therefore perhaps people who weren't able to afford it to begin with might be able to afford it with a cooperative bid process. Thought.
Okay. So we're right about at noon. Are there any other kind of parting thoughts? Again, please rest assured that this is just the beginning of this this, multi-year process, and that there are multiple ways to contact us and to put your ideas into this work. And rest assured that we are going to get into all of these kind of data-rich, detailed questions that you guys have answered. We're kind of just scratching the surface right now. And yeah, those are kind of the takeaway messages. Is there anything else to talk about?
Grant, David Horowitz put his hand up.
David, yeah, sure.
Oh.
It's 12 o'clock.
David, you're muted, sir.
Okay, sorry about that. Hello?
Yes.
No, someone.
Am I unmuted now?
There you go. You're David. Yeah, we hear you.
Okay. Getting back to the issue of the master plan not sitting on a shelf and being useless after putting all this work into it. Hopefully the master plan will be available to developers coming into town, or the state, if the state is planning any projects, and they can come before the board and before town meeting and say if their plan is consistent with the goals and objectives of the master plan. And it'll be a way for us to evaluate if we want to support the new development of how it's furthering our goals and objectives.
Yeah, great. Absolutely. Susan, I think I see.
I was muted, sorry.
You're muted again.
I did. There, I'll get away from there. Thank you very much. Enjoy the time, and I plan to continue to be paying attention.
Excellent. You're most welcome, and we're very, very grateful you showed up and that everybody showed up. Please continue to reach out to us. The project webpage should be posted from the town webpage.
Actually, Grant, it's Mary Dermody. I'm on there right now, and I'm just trying to figure out, I see the survey, and where is the map that we keep talking about?
Right, so Taylor, why don't you stop sharing your screen and I'll share mine.
Oh, that'd be fabulous.
Stand by, guys. Gonna open it up.
I do have the webpage up if you want me to share.
I think I'm all set. All right, can you guys see the page?
How do I get what
Everybody can see the web page?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. So there are sort of two main pages in play right now. This is the home page. Mary, I believe this is where you are.
Actually, no, I'm not sure I was there. I started on the town website, and I think maybe I got lost, but let me catch up. I'll just look for a sec.
So this is, we'll walk you through the ways to participate here, those frequently asked questions. I think you'll see how do we make sure the plan leads to real change? It doesn't just sit on the shelf. We think about that a lot. Ways to join the discussion. If you go back up to stay connected, that's one of the slides from my presentation earlier today. We've got these workshops. We'll click on this and look at it in a moment. The survey, direct contacts. You can leave a phone message or a text, Facebook and Instagram. So we've got to more directly answer your question, Mary, we've got some interactive maps. So for example, I think earlier in the conversation, we talked about open space and recreation a lot. And we've got some preliminary mapping of open spaces, how they're protected, whether it's forever in perpetuity, whether it's limited. Limited usually means chapter 61A or 61B, or whether there's no protection. Those are typically privately held golf courses and things like that. So you can explore that type of information. We talked about who owns what in terms of protection. These are all of the parcels in town and their typical uses. Residences are in yellow, shades of yellow. Businesses are in red. institutions such as churches or the Commonwealth or other tax exempt properties are in blue. And that's where those ideas about conservation groups come in. So if I click on this orange button, we start to see all of those previously blue institutional tax exempt properties. We see those, we see their ownership. So who owns what here? So the Commonwealth owns a lot of property in this kind of lavender color. The land trust is in this sort of mustard color. So you can explore that information. And this is sort of some of the data inputs that we'll be thinking about in the build out and where we should target conservation. So an example of that kind of hole in the donut might be here or here. How do we create networks between these open spaces? So that's some of the mapping that's available to you. But Mary, sorry this is taking me so long.
That's okay. 5
minutes over. What you want to do is go back to the top and either click this link to get to the workshop webpage that I showed you, or click here, this virtual workshops. And it'll take you to another web page where hopefully this is maybe how you guys registered for this workshop. And one of the examples you have is the points of interest mapping. And there's a video that Taylor made that'll walk you through this, but I'll do my best to do it right now. If you click on this point, it'll open up a new window, a new tab. And this is where you'll find all of these areas that we were talking about. So I believe one of the Route 6 crossings, difficult. So if I hover over this transportation and circulation icon, difficult crossing point for people on bikes to access the path. I've heard that enough tonight that this is the only way I'm cooking the books. I could either say, I agree, and say, this is Grant. I am not a resident. However, I heard my words per minute aren't very impressive, are they? Sorry about that. So, and I would just say add comment. And you can do the same.
Okay.
Or you can drop a new point down here. So I hesitate to actually do so, but you go to this button and you say points. And then if we're talking about transportation and circulation or open space and recreation, you choose the category and you drop it anywhere up here. Maybe I'll put it up here so it's not in town. This is another point. And then I'd say submit, and it would show up there. Okay, so there's that exercise. There's a ranking exercise. There are videos to guide you through it, and hopefully that'll get another way for you to participate.
Could you stay on for 1 extra minute, Grant? I had just a really specific process question, unless anybody else wants to hear it. But I was starting at the Mattapoisett town page, and I couldn't figure out how to get where you were.
This gets to Kevin's point from before.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, so stand by. Let me do this again. I'll share my screen one more time.
I mean, anybody else that doesn't want to listen to this doesn't have to. But just my.
I just did this. I should know how. Here we go. No, it's this one. Share. All right, we back to my browser?
We are.
So Mattapoisett.net. I believe right there is the...
Right, I got there.
Okay, so that's the beautiful icon that Taylor...
Right, that was nice and clear and...
Mary helped work on. So hopefully here, that will... It's a few clicks deep, but that will get you to the main.
Can you click on it again? Oh, there it goes. See, I clicked on it once and I thought it was circling me back to the same thing. Now I got it.
And then from there, you're at the main page and can go anywhere.
Okay. Yeah, no, I was just spoiled by the fact that I thought I was going in circles, but you have to click it twice. Okay. Little convoluted. I got it.
I see Kevin laughing. Maybe we just did made a good this is a test drive to improving the website.
Yeah, well, maybe when you click on it the first time, it doesn't bring up the same page again. That would be great. If it brought you right to the next page, that would be really helpful.
Okay. We'll pass that information along. I think Mary's still here. We'll pass that along to the IT guys down in town.
Yeah. And then I guess I'll also add, if you go to the planning board site on the town's website, there is a link on the left-hand side under SERPED Comprehensive Master Plan 2020 process website,
Great.
Which does go directly to the
Great. Yeah, no, I'm just
to the master planning
people
site.
who are neophytes at all of this and don't understand where things fit. They're having it on the main page for the town is great, and then if you can just get to it with one click, that would be even greater. There I am.
I'm sure that the town can just add a direct link.
Yeah.
As well.
Yep.
Yeah, and
Cool.
maybe Nate, with your permission, we could recommend, rather than having the 20-year-old plan at the top, we could put this process up close to the top and make
Or
it.
even, I'm noting right below the video, they do have a link to the video. I wonder if Dan could add a link in that same area, right above the members or towards the top as well.
May I rely on you and Mary to pass this along?
Yes.
Cool. All right. Well, we're going to conclude. You guys have a good weekend. Thank you for your input.
You too.
Thank you, Grant.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks.